mic will turn red. Okay. And when you're done speaking,
wants to speak. Okay, everybody, we're at the appointed hour. If everybody could take their places, please. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Peel Police Services Board, Section 10, Ontario Provincial Police Public Agenda for September 27, 2024. I'm going to start with the roll call. All members are present. I need approval of the minutes from the public session meeting of the 31st of May as moved by Mayor Brown, seconded by Al Boughton. Anybody opposed? That is carried. I should now, having dealt with the minutes, acknowledge that we have the new detachment commander here, Natalie Major. who replaces our Marie Louise. Natalie, welcome. Why don't you tell us about yourself?
Good morning, Chair, and to everyone. Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm fairly new to Caledon OPP, but I will say a seasoned member with the OPP. I've been at Caledon Detachment now for 2 weeks, and I brought my mentor with me, Staff Sergeant Jeff Dazinski, who's been fantastic, catching me up on operations and staffing. I do have a report that I am providing today and look forward to the next time we meet. I can say a little bit about myself. I am in my 30th year with the Ontario Provincial Police. The majority of my experience has always been at detachment level. I have served in many detachments within Ontario, mostly in Central Region, and on deployments to the north. I've been to various police service board meetings, and each one is slightly different. So I'm here as a student and will remain to learn also with my counterpart with Peel Regional Police, and looking forward to maintaining and building that relationship with our area partners. And I'm very excited to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're very excited to have you. And with
Thank
that,
you.
I'll throw it right back to you for the new business that we are dealing with, which is the OPP 2024 second quarter operations statistical analysis. Commander, if you'd like to introduce your report.
Thank you, Chair. So is there just an inquiry, is there a screen that shows the statistics as I'm?
Yes, I think the technology, we're just catching up to you, but
Not a
normally
problem.
we have you up on the screen. If not, I know we have a hard copy. Why don't I give our technical people just a few moments more, otherwise we'll carry on with the hard copies that we do have. And maybe I'll just ask the technical, a few moments more. Is there a challenge? And maybe we should, a few moments more, you're telling me. Okay, good. So here's what I'm going to suggest. Why don't you proceed, and they'll play catch up accordingly, knowing that we have the hard copy. So staff, please carry on. Why don't you please proceed in the interest of time?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm following what my predecessor, retired Inspector Mary Louise Kearns, had done. So beginning with the first template is our public complaints that are received at our detachment. So I have 2 right now that are in the category of conduct that are under investigation. Next, I have the category of our motor vehicle collisions by type. So in this quarter, from April 2024 to June 2024, we are now sitting at 4 fatalities, personal injury 49, and property damage 362. So there was a slight increase in our fatalities during this quarter. I do have the metrics if anyone was interested in synopsis, but I understand that that normally does not happen at this meeting, so I will carry on. The next slide, I'd like to discuss the criminal code and provincial statute charges that are laid. An overwhelming increase at this time this year, as of last year, 70.4% increase in our Highway Traffic Act charges. I'd like to mention that through our Easter long weekend campaign during this quarter, there was an increase of 676 offense notices, Also, our Canada Road Safety Week initiative from the 14th of May to the 20th of May. Close to 800 offense notices were written, and Canada Day weekend, a total of 884, also from the 21st of June to the 1st of July. Our detachment has also partnered with our OPP Aviation Services, and they conducted a speed enforcement initiative on Highway 10, which I understand is one of the primary areas of concern with traffic volume and collisions. And with that, we were able to obtain 26 charges, 3 of which were motorcycles that were seized actually as a result of stunt driving. We additionally did another blitz, a traffic blitz, jointly with the Ministry of Transportation members on Highway 10 in May of 2024. With this in mind, it was for a traffic safety initiative, and we had 107 charges laid, the MTO 24. There were a total of 34 commercial motor vehicle inspections completed by the MTO. 8 of those trucks were made out of service, and another vehicle that the plates were seized. Also during this time frame, and what I'm learning about is that our community town hall does engage in community meetings regarding traffic concerns. And this was well attended by the community. Since landing a couple of weeks ago, I'm also going to be attending my first meetings. There are 2 scheduled in October in regards to traffic concerns. And just one thing that I always like to focus on, and I feel it is a bit of an OPP brand, is talking about the Big Four. If you're familiar with the Big Four, that's our impaired driving, seatbelt use, distracted driving, and speeding offenses. Within this quarter, we had 67 impaireds, 903 for seatbelt use, 73 distracted offenses, and speeding was 2,637. So a lot of focus was done during this quarter. The next slide, please. I'd like to talk about the violent crime rate. So pretty much when you look at the total, we're pretty much still on target, not much of an increase or decrease. In connecting with my major crime unit team lead, I have this to report that there has been a decrease in robberies, most notably year to date. Last year, there was a rash of pharmacy robberies in Caledon, and the diligent work that was completed by our major crime unit and our community street crime unit in partnership with Peel Regional Police Service and Toronto Police Service saw successful investigations and charges being laid for many of these occurrences. This successful enforcement is considered a significant factor in the drop in this area. However, extortion occurrences are something that continue to be a concern of Caledon, Peel Region, and various jurisdictions across Canada. Many of these occurrences are perpetrated by and victimized members of the South Asian community. Since the fall of 2023, 12 of these occurrences have occurred in Caledon and over 60 in Peel Region, with a significant number involving shootings. Caledon Detachment has partnered with Peel Regional Police on these investigations, and through this collaborative partnership, many charges have been laid. Our detachment have now engaged the Provincial OPP Criminal Investigation Branch as well, leveraging partnerships across Canada and in the United States to share information and combat these offenses. My major crime unit also continues to devote significant resources to ongoing, more recent homicide investigations that have occurred in Caledon and are linked to organized crime. Currently, there are 5 active investigations in this area. We also dedicate substantial resources to historic homicide and missing person investigations, developing potential new leads, and maintaining important contact with family and victims. The next slide, if you could flip, please, is regarding property crime. And with it, you'll see with arson, there was a significant uptick, I would say, with theft over and our frauds. Some arsons and some frauds fall under the purview to the Caledon Major Crime Unit, and both of these areas have seen an increase in this quarter, most notably those arsons. The majority of these arson occurrences are attributed to the dumping and burning of stolen vehicles in Caledon. This year, and certainly in 2023, the GTA has seen a large increase in vehicle thefts, and this increase in vehicle arsons parallels to those increase in thefts. Vehicle arsons and recovered stolen vehicles are typically investigated by platoon members with some assistance from the Major Crime Unit and our Community Street Crime Unit as needed. There has been a negligible increase in fraud occurrences in Q2 as well, and an overall decrease to date. Some of this decrease can be attributed to the decreased interest in cryptocurrency, as the value of this currency has seen a significant decline. And the Caledon Detachment has for some time employed a dedicated fraud investigator. I got to meet him recently under the supervision and the umbrella of our Major Crime Unit. And his position has seen many successes with charges being laid and mentorship being provided to my detachment members on these often complex investigations. And speaking with my street crime team lead, he also echoes what my Major Crime Unit team lead had remarked about our continuous influx of auto thefts in our region. Caledon actually faces the largest auto theft statistics for OPP detachments just due to the proximity to the GTA and the 401 corridor and the numerous trucking yards in the community that ship stolen autos to the rail yards. In the next slide, which I'm going to talk about our drug crime, I'd like to say that the math is incorrect as I was reviewing this, so I will mention that in 2023, 3 plus 4 should say 7 and not 16, and in 2024, that should read 13 and not 10. So again, that's something that I'm, through our recent OPP Detachment Board templates, I'm going to be looking more so at the analytics that were provided and how we got there. So that will be corrected. Regarding the drug trafficking increase, these numbers are almost entirely proactive from the team when we identify traffickers in the community. And the clearance rate decrease for these incidents would be affected by the numerous incidents we have investigated, but end up with no grounds for a warrant or a charge. For example, surveillance conducted, but no trafficking that was observed. And the next slide will talk about the clearance rates in these areas of violent crime, property crime, and drug crime. So there is a difference of just under 5%. One thing that I have in my experience is, and I don't know if it has been mentioned about our Ontario or Offender Management Apprehension Program. This is a fairly new initiative that we have within our organization and our neighboring services that are joining very quickly. This is a high visibility police response to high risk offenders and checking on compliance checks in coordination with the program and what their conditions are. And there's a database of these offenders that we can look at their conditions and if they are wanted. For my next meeting, I would like to maybe focus a little bit on that. I feel that this is a tremendous tool that we as police services across Ontario are joining on, and to review some of these persons that have been in our custody and released on bail, and making sure that we are following up on their conditions and that they're abiding by them. Also, I have just a quick report about our community events. There's numerous that have happened within the Caledon OPP jurisdiction. And there's more to come, but I won't go into detail on all of them. And also with training to ensure our officers are being developed and mentored as well to improve in their performance excellence. And one other thing that I have also done in our police service boards is also acknowledging our auxiliary unit. Our Caledon unit, just like even just for our frontline membership, we're always recruiting. And that also goes for auxiliary unit. This is a great team of volunteers that come to support us in community events or even on the road. Currently, I have 8 auxiliary constables, and I really would like to have that increased. So if anyone wishes to give back to the community, that is something to consider. And they are, like I said, they are part of our general patrol. They go to community events. They get the type of training as well that they're needed to be effective in their role and responsibilities. And I think that's kind of a wrap up of what I have learned, and look forward to the future in seeing what through the chair and through my representative from Caledon, Mr. Al Boughton, and through the executive director as well, to see if there's anything further that I can report upon that may assist in these discussions. So I'm
Thank you.
open to any questions. Thank you,
Yes,
Chair.
thank you for a very thorough presentation. I do have questions. First, Len Carby.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, Inspector Major. Welcome, and congratulations on the new appointment. From your report, I think you can see clearly the magnitude of the tasks that you have been assigned. The one area that I think jumped out at me when you're doing the presentation is around the criminal code charges laid and the significant increase year over year, up to 68%. From 2023 to 2024, seems like a huge jump in that particular area. And I wonder if that's due to, if that's, you see that as an anomaly? Is it due to greater vigilance in terms of highway patrols? What do you think might account for that? And if there are any mitigating strategies that are being implemented to address that?
Through the chair, thank you very much. Could we just reflect on what slide that was?
It's not showing, it's the criminal code and provincial statutes charges laid. It's under the Highway Traffic Act. It's not, the slide isn't numbered, so I'm not sure which page it is. Maybe page 4? Yes, that slide.
I do see that here. So you're speaking of the criminal code traffic?
Yes, Highway Traffic Act. It seems a huge jump from 2023 to 2024 with a 68.4%. It just seems like a large number of highway traffic violations there.
So that would be a improvement. We're looking at the top line, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So I can offer some information on that through my briefing with my predecessor. That's actually proactive work that is attributed to augmented staffing for particular traffic initiatives, not necessarily provincial ones, but also just within the detachment, like I had mentioned about the Highway 10, where we engage with OPP Aviation Services. So that is with the plane literally doing the radar calculations from the sky and radioing down to the members that are out on the roadway. So with those proactive traffic initiatives, I do have a traffic unit. I'm quite excited that we have one in Caledon, looking at innovative ways of looking at hotspots, essentially engaging our regional analysts to look at areas of where have fatalities occurred, property damage, personal injury, the complaints that we're receiving from the public. We also look at that using those analytics, we look at those innovative approaches to see how can we mitigate the risk to the public, the driving and the liability, obviously, as well. So that there is significant. And I will say that that is something that did also pop up on my radar, and no pun intended. But I have been informed that staffing was augmented during that quarter. I don't know if that will be continuing on. I need to find out I'm going to say the ask behind it, as well as how it was implemented. So you and I are on the same page with that, sir.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Our next questioner, you haven't come to learn it yet, you will, that our next questioner is Mr. Al Boughton, who is well known to us from the Caledon, the unofficial king of Caledon. And, Carolyn will know this, Mayor Parrish will know this. When I was first elected in our neck of the woods, Mississauga, Cooksville, if you wanted to know what was going on, you just went to the Orchard Restaurant, because in time somebody would walk in that knows what's going on at the Orchard Restaurant. In your neck of the woods, it's Al and the Boughton Homestead. The door's always open, the coffee's always on. So in short order, you'll be learning more from Caledon's finest, Mr. Boughton.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I think that was a backhanded compliment, but I'm going to take it as a compliment anyway. Firstly, Commander Major, so nice to have you on board. And we just met today. I'm going to ask you just a couple of questions, but I think we can expand upon what I'm going to ask you today. I don't definitely need answers, but just to set the table for our Thursday meeting of next week. If you looked at the number of speeding tickets that were issued on the 401 in Toronto, I would expect there wouldn't be any from 5 o'clock in the morning till kind of midnight on the 401. Living in Caledon for 35 years, and you look at Highway 10, which is problematic, and you look at the number of Highway Traffic Act violations in the last quarter on the same slide at 6,138. One of the things I'd ask that you look at going forward is how many of those are speeding tickets, and what number of those speeding tickets are issued on what I'll call off hours, because I play squash Saturday morning and I drive down Highway 10 to get to the squash club. I know that I can't be speeding on Saturday morning because you can't go very far on Highway 10 without a copper getting you this way, on the side, at the weigh scale and all that. The traffic is so bad now, I don't know how many speeding tickets you'll be issuing during rush hour, morning or afternoon. So I'd ask you to take a look at that and see how many of those are speeding and what time of day are you issuing those tickets? So again, I don't need that answer today, but I'd just like to talk about that. Maybe we can do that on Thursday. And the second point being, when I was in the private sector, Walmart was our biggest customer. And there's a number of very significant carriers that haul for Walmart. One of them is in Brampton. And the two gentlemen own this very large trucking company. I'm not going to identify who they are today, Chair, for obvious reasons. But one of the owners has security at his home in Caledon, both in the front yard and the backyard, because of threats and shootings that have happened at his place. He's of South Asian descent, fabulous trucking company with great success. And I find it very disconcerting that talking to my friends at Walmart this week, and them telling me about this particular company, and that they're afraid because of threats that are being made upon them. And I'd like to talk to you about that again on Thursday. But the information that you provided, we know, I'm not trying to minimize the Highway Traffic Act ones and all those other ones, but when I see somebody in our community who has to have security 24 hours a day at their home because they fear for their life and their family's life, that's a very, very big concern. So perhaps we can expand upon that on Thursday. And again, thank you for the report and welcome. And I'll try not to be a pain to you going forward, and we'll have some nice communication. Thank you, Chair.
Al, thank you. A quick one if you wanted a quick response before I carry on, Inspector. Did you want to address any of that?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank you very much for the invitation to meet, and even for the Chair to make the comment that you're apparently the king of information. This is something that I would say, and for the officers in the room, the importance of community connection through our foot patrols and engagement. Because a lot of information can be garnered through the people that live in the community that we provide service delivery to. I know you will be a wealth of information. I think I heard the word that I was the rookie here today, and I own that because no matter where I have worked, I have had to learn many lessons as to what the past has been, where we are presently, and how are we going to work towards the future. So I look forward to those discussions, the 2 points that you've made. I've had my staff sergeant here make some notations. I'm already thinking of some approaches and what you can provide back to the community members that are bringing this forward as well. Before I give it back to the chair, I would like to say, and this is something also in my experience, that some residents, or even for the visiting persons that have come through our community, is please contact the police first prior to your local constituent. If this is of an emergency, we need to learn from it through 911 or our 1-888-310-1122 number to have it documented. And earlier when I talked about having an analyst look at statistics, that would be very important for our records. Then we can definitely provide that same type of service to that complainant. Obviously, they felt safe to come to you to talk about this, but I really do hope that if they felt that they were threatened, please contact the police first. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we're going to thank you for a report. Al's moved receipt of the report. All in favor? That is carried. And Al's moved adjournment of our OPP session. All in favor? Carried. Inspector, thank you very much. Looking forward to a long working relationship with you and the team. Thank you. Okay, with that, we move into our Peel Police Services Board public agenda meeting for Friday, September 27. I'd like to start with our Indigenous land acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather and which the region of Peel operates as part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous peoples inhabited and cared for this land and continue to do so today. In particular, we acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewas peoples, the land that is home to the Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are grateful to have this opportunity to work on this land and by doing so, give our respects to its first inhabitants. I go to roll call. All members are present. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest from any of my colleagues? Seeing none, Chief, over to you for your update.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Chair and board members. Good to see everybody back, and Commander Major, looking forward to staying connected with you. Just for the board's awareness, we have both already committed to a cycle of meetings to ensure that both our organizations at all levels remain well connected. So welcome to you as well. Chair, we have two updates. I'm going to start with Deputy Andrews and then Deputy DePatt.
Thank you, Chief. Through the chair. Good morning. I'd like to update the board on two problem areas that have been a significant concern to our community. Ridgeway Plaza in Mississauga and Trinity Common Mall in Brampton. These two locations have driven significant calls for service, up to and including motor vehicle collisions that have ended in fatalities. These two areas have been locations that have drawn crowds through social media platforms for these illegal nuisance gatherings that have been sometimes in excess of several thousand people, usually in the several hundred range, and caused the surrounding communities tremendous impact. As a result, we've had focused events at both locations over the last several weekends. In the Ridgeway area, we have issued approximately 700 offense notices, seized 14 vehicles for stunt driving offenses, and laid 55 criminal charges. In the Trinity Commons area, we've issued approximately 400 tickets, seized 20 vehicles, and laid 8 criminal charges. Now, this focused enforcement efforts come at a cost. We've had to layer assets on top of our traditional or on-duty assets. In the case of Ridgeway Plaza, this is about $150,000. In the case of Trinity Common, it's about $120,000. It's also resulted in pressure because it constrains our ability to respond to regular calls for service because we have, our bike units and our CERT units and our traffic units involved that are on duty involved in these efforts. But we've seen some success and we've had really positive feedback from the community and our elected officials in those areas. On a positive note, both cities, Brampton and Mississauga, have on the books or in the pipeline nuisance bylaws that we believe will really help us in being able to manage not only these two areas, but other areas across the region that are sites for nuisance gatherings. Subject to questions?
Do I have any questions at this time, Mayor Brown?
Just want to say well done. I actually think those two problem plazas were terrifying residents. We had so many complaints about them, and that may have been a significant cost that weekend, but it sends a clear message that if you think there is areas in Peel Region where you can cause a ruckus and chaos and disregard the laws we have on the books, that you're sadly misinformed, that there will be consequences. And hearing, I got the note that was sent to my mayor's office about impaired driving, about stunt driving, those are serious, there's a gravity and consequences to having a complete disregard for the community. And so I realize that there is a cost for that weekend, but I'm sure it's going to have a chilling effect on that type of conduct. So well done, and I'm sure Mayor Parrish got a lot of positive feedback on the blitz that happened in Mississauga too.
Thank you, Mayor. We're seeing positive feedback on social media because the organizers are now shifting. We're displacing the events to other locations outside the region, but we're not. This is not a one-off. We're continuing to have these focused efforts through the next several weekends.
Thank you, Mayor Parrish.
Yes, I just want to add my thanks and congratulations. You cleaned up Westwood Square for me about 1.5 years ago. The owner is now terrified that I'm going to be on his case. Diwali's coming up very shortly, and he's already met, I think, with the police to talk about getting paid duty officers there instead of just his regular security people, which you recommended. And of course, Ridgeway has been a disaster. And I think you did 2 blitzes there. And it's really made a difference. But the real problem is with the condo corporation there. They are starting to get some pressure on them because if we start fining them, we've got fines on the books now for $50,000 up to $100,000 for the condo corporation. And we also brought in an interim control bylaw for the vacant piece of land behind that they were planning to duplicate that plaza on. So that's for 1 year. We're going to have a good look at stopping whatever they were going to put there. So I know the councillor for the area, Matt Mahoney, thinks you guys have done a fabulous job, and I echo that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. And just to maybe bring up the aggregate of this, Mark and I and a few of us spent the last few days with some of the Canadian major city chiefs. And one of the discussions we had was just the changing nature of mass gatherings. It's not unique to us, but the environment has changed in such that the impact on not only the city that I know that Nick, Deputy Milinovich, brought before the board was our response to mass gatherings. I think our job is, if it's peaceful, lawful, and we can ensure that it is facilitated that way, we'll do that. But what we're seeing here is the opposite, the impact on community, neighbors, fatalities, the inability for us to enter with paramedics to go to a medical emergency. And so I do want to highlight that the team has completely shifted its approach to it from a resource and strategy planning. And I do not think it's going to stop. I think when winter comes, it does help us. But this is just the sheer nature of what's happening now right across Canada in large urban centers, particularly for mass gatherings. You can call them celebrations sometimes, which is great, but sometimes they do change. Deputy DePatt, please.
Thank you, Chief, and through the chair. Good morning, board members. I've got two updates as well. The first is to announce that we've started a formalized experienced police officer hiring campaign for Peel Regional Police. The reason why I bring it up specifically today is you will remember that we had a commitment to hire 200 officers for 2024. Knowing full well that we've had some challenges with some seat allocations at the Ontario Police College, it was incumbent upon us to look elsewhere to try to fill the voids. And we've been able to hire 8 experienced police officers to date. 6 of them joined us in August. And we've curated a 3-week onboarding program to allow these officers that come with experience to become familiar with what Peel Regional Police has to offer. Obviously, they've already come here as an employer of choice, leaving their former employer, and we will continue to be seeking experienced officers to join the ranks of Peel Regional Police going forward to help augment the challenges that we're having with recruitment, seat allocation at the police college.
Mark, just to top up before he moves on to the next update. This is a new thing for Peel. We haven't historically done that. So the board will be apprised of the next time we have them sworn in. So we do apologize that the last time we weren't able to have board members there, but Deputy DePatt's team will ensure that there'll be some notification should any of you be available.
I don't know if, Al, did you have something on that very point? Go ahead, please.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. There's always been a bottleneck at the Ontario Police College, and perhaps Deputy DePatt or Chief could just bring everybody up to speed on, I guess there's some additional spots that are available on what that will mean in our hiring efforts for the rest of this next year and going forward.
Thank you. And yes, Mr. Bowden, with all of the challenges that we've been faced with in seat allocation at the Ontario Police College, the chief has been a very strong advocate through the province and through the police college to really consider other opportunities where we can increase the class sizes. We have now Superintendent Lisa Hewison from our recruitment and staff support that is sitting on a working group to consider the viability of other avenues that we can pursue, which might actually be outside of the police college walls itself. And we're hoping that a solution for that comes very soon so that we can hire as many people as the board allows us to hire.
And just as a follow-up through you, Chair, how many spots do we have for 2025 at OPC?
That remains to be seen right now, Mr. Bowden, because obviously we're approaching a time where we're going to be seeking board approval on seat allocations. But to remind the board, we went for 200 last year, and we're considering what that number is going to look like for 2025.
Mr. Bowden, I can just top that up based on, I think there's advocacy from members of the board, and I know the mayors have been speaking to the province and even the premier via the Solicitor General. So they have increased the potential size of up to, even as of yesterday, Mark and I haven't had a chance. I spoke with the director of the police college, hoping to 55 seats per intake, 4 intakes. But the discussion with myself, Commissioner Creek from the OPP, the York and Toronto chief, is to see if there's a capacity for a 5th intake physically outside the structure of the police college, sustained amongst our communities, which would allow more to come through. So, there's a long-term solution. They need a bigger facility, which can't happen overnight. So we are committed to innovative ideas that are just outside the box for the new year. But they're in a position where they've received the correspondence from the region, the council. I think all the mayors have signed it about the need and attention to providing adequate and effective policing here is bottlenecked by the fact that we can't get people sworn in. So I think they're alive to it and are intent on working with it. The Solicitor General has been fantastic in conversations, and we would just continue to see what incrementally additional seats look like intake by intake.
Since my high school teacher is sitting on the board now, I just wanted to know how much attention I paid when I was in math class in high school. If our population increases by 10% and we have 2,500 sworn, and just doing the quick math, Mayor, that would be 250 a year, just again, broad brushing. So, and Deputy DePatt getting officers from other service, helps augment that number, because that challenge is going to be where it is and even higher if the immigration levels remain where they are or increase, because we know that a high number and as a percentage like to settle in GTA, and many of them in the region of Peel. So that challenge is going to be ongoing, and you only really have two ways. You either hire new and put them through OPC, or take them from other services. So we've got to find a solution, and again, working through OPC. And as you said, Chief, that's not something that can be fixed in a day. It's just, you just don't wave the magic wand. So great work and everything that you're doing. And certainly, I know this board would like to be part of any of the other, or any ceremonies that you have in the future for recruits, or not recruits, that officers that come from other services.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. I guess I'll add in closing that while it would not be the most feasible or the ideal situation to hire experienced officers, it significantly costs less to hire an experienced officer over the onboarding of a brand new officer.
And Mr. Bowden, I think we're alive to not just the population growth, the needs that we're trying to meet today, but are do struggle. But as some of the board members would be aware, we're hitting a stride in the next 5 years where 30 years ago we hired a lot, and they're all eligible for retirement. So we're anticipating not just the delta of meeting day-to-day needs, is that we're just going to have to keep up with it. People that are just naturally retiring, right?
So my second update is to highlight that last week, from September the 16th to the 18th, Peel Regional Police hosted the second Safety of Our Cities conference. It was building on the inaugural conference that was hosted by Edmonton Police Service in 2023. As we all know, the majority of the calls that we go to are rooted in social determinants of health. And sadly, because of that fact, our officers and communities and individuals come into contact with each other for those reasons. This conference brought together law enforcement experts, chiefs, academics, community from all over North America, not to just highlight some of the work that they're doing in community safety and well-being spaces, but for us to be able to highlight that we really are here in Peel Region doing everything that we can to support communities through alternative and upstream measures. This also helps to support our frontline officers that should be going to the calls for service that they're the experts in. And that conference was a perfect opportunity for us to highlight that regard. 500 people in total attended this conference. And I'd just like to thank the board for the support, the incredible sponsors that came forward, and the conference planning committee that came together to put this on.
Thank you. Vice Chair Coley?
So I was actually going to do this in the board update, but this is the perfect opportunity. I think I think many of us attended it. I just want to say, first of all, fantastic work to you, Chief, to Deputy DePat, and actually also just a quick shout out to some people on your team who were behind the scenes, but Inspector Jody Dawson, Inspector Farish Ishmael, and Manager of CSW, John Versulis. So thank you to all of them and the many who were involved. I mean, it was a 3 full day conference, and the content put together was, and I know it's a lot of work that went in, the speakers and the panelists that you guys put forth. There were so many chiefs in the room, and I think that we can attest to you as well, Chief Nish, just because you could see a lot of them attended just because of the work you're doing on a national and global level. So thank you for that. It was a great conference, and we appreciate it, and I think it was a lot of valuable insights, it seems, that came out of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Anything further? I'm just going to top it up personally because, Al, you told us about your walk down memory lane sitting in the back class of Teacher Parrish's classroom, though I imagine you spent more time in detention than in the classroom, but that's another story. But it reminds me, hard as it is to believe, of a walk for me down memory lane in high school some 45 years ago, where a certain amount of my time was spent chasing Mark Andrews on a football field 45 years ago. And I only bring it up because it did not go unnoticed today that he's wearing his Pittsburgh Steelers regalia just because he wants me to know his team stuck it to my Chargers this week. So it's 45 years and the pain hasn't gone away, Mark. I'll just leave it at that. With that, we move receipt of the Chief's presentation and update. Chief, nothing further from your end at this time. Okay, with that then, we have board members' questions and announcements, and perhaps I can start with a couple before I go to my colleagues, because we have a noteworthy arrival and a departure, if you will. So on the arrival side, if you will, we have our new member, Omar Khan, here today for his very first meeting. Omar, welcome, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Good morning. Thank you. I've been in the private sector for 25 years, and I've always wanted to do some public service. And what better to do than to work with the Peel Police? And I've been a lifelong resident of Peel. In the past month, I've learned quite a bit. I've been to the Wellness Center with Deputy DePat, ride along with Al Villers. I've been on a tour of the Communications Center, the Fleet Facility Tour, recruit graduation, transport and asset protection, and then as well as the Safety in Our Cities Conference, which I saw a lot of humanity in policing there. And you said earlier you're the rookie here. I think I'm the rookie here. And I'm learning quite a bit over the past month. I hope to learn a lot more and put my best foot forward. Thank you.
Welcome and thank you. And on the other side of the ledger, we have and want to acknowledge some great work and a departure from a dear friend and colleague of this board, Ahmed Attia, who's here today. Ahmed started on the board 2019. In fact, he was our chair in 2020. And Ahmed, I want you to know that in all the years that I've been around, I know a few people that in any post or assignment they've had as a volunteer basis have given more of themselves and devotion to the cause as you did. I don't know how you ran a personal business with all the time that you devoted to this. So I want to acknowledge that. The other point that I will remember, and I know the community remembers as well, Ahmed, you went out of your way to give a voice to people that otherwise might not have a voice. And sometimes you got to ask some tough questions, and you got to speak for those that might not have the privilege that we do. And that was always uppermost in your thoughts. So you leave with grace and distinction, and you've served us well, and I wanted to acknowledge that. I've got something for you on behalf of the board, so I would like my board colleagues to join me because I would like to present it to Ahmed, and then perhaps he might like to take a moment to say a word or two. So if everybody wants to join me in front, my board colleague, Ahmed, if you could come forward, if I could formally present something to you on behalf of the board. And Ahmed, please take a moment and maybe regale us with some of your thoughts from the board. Go ahead.
Well, hello, everyone, and it's nice to be back. And for a moment, it was quite an honor to serve the members of the service and residents of Peel for these years, and I hope I've done justice to the position. My kids recently started fencing, so they're gonna be so excited about this. Yeah, this is gonna be, it's quite timely. Too bad it's on a frame, I can't. But just thank you for everything I've learned from all of you. It's, each of you bring quite a unique experience to the board, and collectively we've done great things. I believe from 2019 we've changed so many things at Peel Police. The first decision we made was the chief, and it's the best decision we've ever made. So it's been an honor being part of that decision. Just thank you. Thank you for welcoming me back and for this. And congratulations, Omar. Welcome to the board and Mayor Parrish. And I'm at the service of Peel Regional Police for anything service needs at any time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, and thank you for your service. Oh, yeah. And I now come back to my board members for any other questions or announcements. I start with Vice Chair Coley.
Thank you so much. And through you, Chair, just a couple of quick updates, just because we had the summer and now it's our first one back. So I just wanted to call out some really key initiatives that were done by Peel Police. So first, congratulations to the entire team on yet another youth in policing initiative that happened this summer. It's one of my most favorite events, both the start and the graduation. And I think hearing the valedictorian always is, I think this year just blew us, I think all of us away. I mean, from the experience, I think she even had a job in forensics. Like, she made a decision to go into that. So I think if nothing else, if it's inspiring kids to make decisions, so just, I know a lot of work goes into it, and there's 40 kids that graduated. So we're proud of you, and I know the board is proud to fund that as well as an initiative. So congratulations on that. And then I just had a quick, I know we've already talked about safety of policing, which again, I think is so top of mind Safety of Our Cities conference. But I also wanted to do a quick shout out to Constable Joanna Strezula, who got an award this year at the International Association of Women in Police. So congratulations to her, because it was a global award. And it was for receiving for the IAWP Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Award. So it is such a proud moment for all of us when we continue to see. So, of course, to all of you and Deputy DePat, all the work that's happening on the front line as well, and to all the officers. But I just wanted to call out these couple of events. There was many, many more. It was a very busy summer. And also, of course, the 50th commemorative parade. I just wanted to say, I know how much work went in. It was such a beautiful celebration of history and legacy and what Peel Police has held. So it was very well done. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carby.
Thank you, Chair. Consistent with our Vice Chair calling out some of these events which happened over the summer, I wanted to highlight the Cops for Cancer, which happened on September the 14th, where our Deputy Chief, I had the privilege of using a share on his head. But thank you for leading in that effort. I think that was a great event in the center of our city at Mississauga at Square One. I also want to highlight the Emancipation Day barbecue, which happened on August the 1st, and that is continuing to grow in its awareness in our community. It was really good to see our cafeteria space at the headquarters, filled not just with officers, but with members of our community. So I think that was also a significant event. And the Emancipation Day means so much to members of our community. And so I want to encourage that we continue to use that as a signature event to engage with our community because of the meaning of that day to many in our community. And also for the Black Ice and organizing the 3-ball competition on August the 24th, which was another opportunity to raise awareness and to acknowledge an officer who lost his life, who was actually a coach, and just recognizing his family and the contributions he has made. But I think the consistent theme in all of this that I really want to highlight is the importance of building these relationships with our community. Because in all of these events, what was significant was the community engagement and building that relationship with our community members. And so I want to highlight that and thank the Peel Service for taking those initiatives, and also acknowledge that this board leans into those opportunities and continues to support opportunities to build the connection with our community, and to let them be aware of the good work that is being done. So I want to call out and thank Deputy Chief Mark DePat for his leadership in those areas, and your team, of course. Thank you.
Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Chair Nika. Two quick comments. First of all, since Ahmed is still here, you were an extraordinary board member, and we were lucky to have you. And your work is certainly appreciated in the city of Brampton. And I know Mayor Parrish feels the same in Mississauga. Something unique about Ahmed is he had 2 tenures on the board. He was probably the only person who's been a regional appointment and a provincial appointment. So when the region wants your skill and the province wants your skill, you're in a small company where everyone agrees that you have a lot of talent to offer. So just thank you again, and very thoughtful of Nando to think of a way to honor your contributions. The second thing I want to mention is we have Peter Tolius, I see here in the crowd today, and he's been a great champion to get more attention on the deplorable issue of child sex offenders. And I know when it comes to human trafficking, when it comes to really having the latest technology to tackle this scourge that is a global problem, maybe we could use this opportunity, since he's here, to observe our meeting. It's very personal to him how Peel Region is tackling this, and maybe Nish, you could speak to it, but also the deputy chief, because when I get briefings on how where you're using technology to catch these individuals, it blows me away. And I have to say, I think the Peel Police are probably the most advanced in the country when it comes to technology.
Please.
Thank you, through the chair. And you're absolutely right, Mayor Brown. And Peter, it's great to have you with us. We consider him a really close friend to the service. And even as of recently, have been partnering significantly with our young people and youth-related work through ProAction, Cops and Kids, because we do believe, spending time with children, not just for them to discover pathways on how to be successful in life and with the ICANN movement, but also making sure that they're not vulnerable and what we can do to protect them. And then, Peter, you've been instrumental. Everybody walked away from the conference with an ICANN and a goal book that had my face on it too. First of all, I think, Peter, there's a lot to be done, and maybe I'll just open up to the deputies and to speak about that space that we're continuing to work with community members. And Mr. Atiyah, thank you on behalf of all of us too. Just be remiss to not say that.
Thank you, and through you, the chair, of course, overseeing most of our technology initiatives at Peel Regional Police. I still want to note that, and I always say, behind all the great technology that is being used, it really comes down to our people. I know Deputy DePat will talk about the actual impacts on our people who investigate these awful crimes is also a consideration in this. We use technology to its fullest degree, not just proactively to deter this crime, but also covertly to ensure that we have a relentless pursuit of these criminals, and to make sure that the technology is there to be utilized by our members in such a fashion that we can identify and prosecute these criminals in the most effective and efficient way possible. And so technology is a very important component, but again, I double down on our folks, our people who investigate these crimes, and just how committed they are, because there's no amount of compensation in the world that can motivate these investigators to do what they do. So thank you. Deputy DePat.
Just to add, and so much has been said, I'm pleasantly surprised to see Mr. Tolias here, because one thing that hasn't been mentioned beyond all these contributions is just recently this past summer, we hosted a Pro Action Cops and Kids event where we brought over 80 youth to a trade exhibit. And these youth were exposed to the potential of entering into the trades as a profession. Mr. Tolias was the keynote speaker at this event. And the reason why I bring that up specifically is because historically, the trades is not a profession where a lot of women would enter into it. And in this event, over 35 women entered and have shown and expressed interest now in pursuing profession in the trades. And Mr. Tolias was integral in that initiative. So thank you.
Vice Chair Coley.
I actually just wanted to add to that as well, as I was actually at that event, and that was my first actually experience of meeting Mr. Tolias and just kind of seeing. You're phenomenal, and I think for kids and what you're trying to do, and he shared so much of the history, but I think you do it from your heart, and you really just want to make things better. And I have that book as well. And I believe Mayor Parrish, I think you were the one who funded that book for him or supported. That's right, he shared that as well. So I just keep doing what you're doing. I think we're very fortunate. I know I hear it from the chief and the deputies as well, and you also came to the Safe City conference also. Just we really do appreciate everything you're doing for kids in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I have the privilege of topping that up because I've known Peter for almost 3 decades now, and he is a dear personal friend to me. I've been invited to his home many times. He's been to my home many, many times. I've met a lot of people in 36 years. I do not know that I have a more selfish constituent in my history. So I had the privilege of representing him as the Ward 7 councillor for years, and no one in my community has given more of themselves and the personal and corporate lives and financially to the detriment at great cost to his personal life and his business, because he devotes so much resources to I Can, We Can. So you're a man amongst men. You're a man amongst men, because I am well aware of what you've done over the years. I pay homage to Peter regularly. Some of you may not know it, but when you notice, if we're ever virtual, especially during COVID, so there I'm sitting in my den in my house when I was hosting meetings, over my shoulder there's a license plate that says I Can Peel. That is my homage to Peter, because he gave it to me. So Peter, no surprise to see you here. Your ongoing vigilance on helping those, as I said before, that did not have a voice. And the system has to protect those people. And you have gone above and beyond to helping people who have not been helped by the system. So it's a privilege to call you a friend, and it's a privilege to have you here today. Mayor Brown, thank you very much for acknowledging that. Okay, with that, let's get to the business of the day. We start with the approval of the minutes from the board meeting of Friday, the 21st of June. The minutes are here for receipt. Do I have any speakers to the minutes? If not, they've been moved by Al Boughton. Anybody opposed? That is carried. Item 2, there are no deputations on the agenda. Item 3, there are no presentations on the agenda. So that brings me to new business. Item 4, audit quotes for 2024-2025. There is a report here, and this is here for information. Chief, any comments on this report as it relates to those to be selected? Oh, through to Rob, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. This is our standard. We have our Community Support and Recognition Fund that we report on annually. We're required both in policy and in legislation to have that audited externally. This is a straightforward report showing the results of a public tendering where Calvin Vickery, who's been our accountant for quite some time, is the successful bidder. He was also the low bidder and has been providing this service for us for quite a few years, and we're seeking board support here to approve that.
Any questions of the board? Can I have a mover? I think Mr. Carby. Mr. Carby is moved. If there are no questions, anybody opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Item 5, Mass Casualty Case Management Systems Analysis, Canada Contract Renewal. We have a recommendation here for approval. Chief, to you.
Thank you. I'll invite Deputy O'Dwyer to speak to it, please.
Good morning, and through the chair, the report outlines the continued use and leveraging of a current system that we have in policing to ensure that we detail cases in an efficient manner throughout the country. The actual program is called Exalysis Central, And what it does is it utilizes an existing system in the event we knock on wood that there would be a mass casualty. And what it does is it combines all the information from the event to an investigation. So we leverage an existing system. Peel's been ahead of the curve on this, started the system back in 2018, operational 2021. Well ahead of the Mass Casualty Commission report that came out 2 years ago, and we continue to utilize the service. It is at a fraction of the cost because we leverage a current VOR, and before the board is consideration for the extension of that operational cost, there is no budget impact as it has been budgeted for the next 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? It has been moved by Mayor Parrish. All in favor? That is carried. Brings us to item 6. Police reported crime statistics in Canada 2023-24. Services over 1 million people. Chief, here for receipt. Anybody wish to speak to this?
Yes, thank you. And Sheila Doyle comes to join us to speak to a summary of the report annually, and then I believe Anthony may also join that as well. We have, as you will recall, on an annual basis, provide this report to you. And when we tell the public, comparative to other large urban centers, say over 1 million, we have, certain data sets that are, very favorable. We're cautious to tell the story because people's perception of safety is the reality. But we do have a report before us that does tell a story about a variety of different indices, some of which change year over year. So if I could just invite Anthony or Sheila to begin, and we may top it up as we go.
Perfect. Thank you for this opportunity to share. This report is based on some Statistics Canada data that's, as the chief has said, is produced yearly, and it focuses on the crime severity index and weighted clearance rate, which provides data based on the seriousness of a crime rather than just a count of individual occurrences, meaning an assault would count as would be weighted higher than something like a mischief. The Statistics Canada report notes that the national overall crime severity index increased for the 3rd consecutive year. Peel also saw an increase in overall and nonviolent CSI, but did see a slight decrease in violent CSI last year. In general, Peel showed similar directional trends as Canada for noted crime types, with the exception of break and enters, where Canada saw a decrease and Peel saw an increase. If you look at the chart on page 3, it illustrates that Peel's overall CSI falls well below that of Ontario and Canada, and follows the same trend of increasing since 2020. Also on page 3, you can see that Peel's overall CSI is lower than the other services compared to. And as noted, this is for the services with populations over 1 million. For violent CSI on page 4, Peel again falls below Canada and Ontario. You can see that Peel has been increasing since 2021. This is likely related to homicides and robberies, which include carjackings. Compared to other large municipal services, Peel has the 2nd lowest violent CSI, slightly higher than Ottawa, and slightly lower than York. Peel's nonviolent CSI is also below Canada and Ontario, but has steadily increased since 2020. Peel has the lowest nonviolent CSI of the large municipal services. Our weighted clearance rate is slightly lower than Canada and Ontario, but is higher than other large municipal services. Our violent weighted clearance rate is better than Canada, but slightly lower than Ontario. It is above the other large municipal services. The nonviolent weighted clearance rate is lower for Peel than Canada and is one of the lowest of the other municipal services. The nonviolent weighted clearance was likely impacted by unsolved theft of motor vehicle occurrences. So you can see probably with all the municipals, the GTA type services, that was lower because of that, the impact.
Sheila, would you indulge me? I don't want to ruin your flow, but this is one of the things that the board has always discussed is you have trends that are environmental, and then there's some trends that are reflective of our ability to investigate, and a clearance results in a charge. So, one thing we've always been proud of is that you'll see on, page 6-7, is Peel does an amazing job at investigating particularly violent crimes. And we've acknowledged big projects this year that have had impact, but Deputy O'Duarty and I were reflecting on the trend of it reducing year over year, Sheila. And I know we've had a lot of thefts, carjackings, et cetera, that have plagued us, which result in sometimes an inability to stop it or find it. But our people, as you know, and Chair, you saw the Project 24K, over 20 people being pulled from other investigative units, Project Chrome, has a trickle back on our ability to deal with some trends. So Anthony, I don't know if you wanted to highlight them.
Thank you. And just to double down on that, these investigations, which lead to clearances, are heavy resource intensive and require many of our bureaus to come together often to investigate one large project, which could result in an increased amount of clearances. But often what it does is it ties up those resources to further investigate all these other instances. And this is where we see the impact on resourcing, particularly in our investigative bureaus and initial frontline response, if not apprehended at the immediate moment, and then fall back to our investigative. It's no way an indication of the expertise of our investigators, who of course are considered, with all bias aside, the best in Canada.
Okay, do I have, that concludes that part of the presentation. You're carrying on. They interrupted you. Please carry on with what you had.
That's okay.
I've got 3 numbers on my screen and I'm trying to make sure. So please carry on after we had that top up. Go ahead.
One of the final points is on page 12, you'll see a picture there, some graphs there that represent the key performance indicators that are part of our strategic plan, where we compare where we sit to Canada and Ontario. And with respect to violent and nonviolent CSI, we are below the national and provincial rates. However, as was recently discussed with the weighted clearance, we're not above in all of them, but again, it's related to the theft of motor vehicle. Overall, what I'd like to share is that the data indicates Peel is a safe community with crime indexes and rates that are in most cases well below national and provincial levels and below most comparable municipal services, which shows the good job that is being done in Peel.
Thank you. Anything further, Chief, from our end here? If not, questions, comments from the board? If not, excellent presentation as moved by receipt from Mayor Brown. Any other further comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation. On item 7, Human Rights Report and Use of Force Report dated September 16th from the Deputy Chief Eduardi with regards to Innovation Technology Command, providing the board with the 2023 Human Rights Report and Annual Use of Force Statistics. Through to the Deputy.
Thank you, and through the chair, not just because it's a legislative requirement to report on our use of force, but also to demonstrate the work that the Peel Regional Police, the board, and the Ontario Human Rights Commission have come together to prepare and understand the requirements that the communities also want to consider in relation to this topic. And so for the second year in a row, we present to you a report called Committed to Action, which is exactly what that is. And today you will receive a presentation on the Human Rights Report and Use of Force. And of course, I want to introduce to you Staff Superintendent Dirk Niles, who is very familiar with the board, and also Dr. Akwasi Owusu-Bempah, who needs no introduction to the board, but of course for our community and who are watching virtually or here in person today, has assisted Peel Regional Police and the board and the Human Rights Commission in helping understand areas of improvement. So without any further ado, I'd love to turn it over to the staff sergeant and the doctor. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy. Thanks for the demotion.
Sorry for the staff.
Through your chair, good morning to the board and everyone here. Happy to be here again to present this year's Human Rights Project and Use of Force Report with the professor. Like previous years, I'm co-presenting with Professor Akwasi Owusu-Bempah, who is an associate professor with the Department of Sociology at U of T, an affiliate scientist with Cam H and a fellow at Massey, but his real specialty is the intersection of race, crime, justice, policing, and how to improve outcomes for communities in this regard. So our goals for today are to actually highlight the work that's been done over the past year with our Anti-Racism Advisory Committee, who have put in about 3 years in working with us on the Human Rights Project and the recommendations, highlight some of what we plan on doing in the future. And before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that all of the change that you've heard about over the last several board meetings wouldn't be possible without the membership and the senior leadership of the organization. So we'll get started. If I could get the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in 2023, the real focus was finalizing the recommendations and reaching consensus with our Anti-Racism Advisory Committee and the OHRC on the last 3 years of work. That totals about 264 total recommendations. We moved from the finalization successfully into creating verification teams. One of the final recommendations that took us some time to sort out was how we were going to create transparency and accountability for the service through providing an open lens by breaking the Anti-Racism Advisory Committee down into subgroups based on the principles to be able to deliver and verify when we have completed work. This included a review of over 300 different policies, with amendments being made throughout the review to include the different recommendations. We expanded our race and identity-based data strategy to create one of those verification teams, the Community Advisory Panel, who we refer to as CAP, who is going to be instrumental not only in the work going forward in relation to race-based data, but with our disparity reduction planning that we're going to speak about in detail a little bit later in the presentation. And the last thing that we began over the last 12 months was introducing the highly contentious issue of AI and governance strategies with a human rights focused lens. We've worked closely with Deputy Milinovich's team and Ms. Wilmot on creating ethical guidelines and governance, and we're exploring how we're going to implement this in consultation with the Ontario Human Rights Commission, as well as our Anti-Racism Advisory Committee, to make sure that we're leading in this space. Could I get the next slide, please? So factors impacting use of force reporting. In the past years, we have spoken about how we expect over a period of time to see various fluctuations in use of force. And it's important to note that these fluctuations, as previously identified in a couple different presentations, are going to be directly attributed to things such as population growth, crime trends, civil unrest, calls for service, and more importantly, what the nature of calls for service are, which will have a direct impact on year-to-year fluctuations. What is of the most importance is one of the fundamental goals of the Human Rights Project is to implement strategies that give our officers the knowledge, skills, and abilities that, regardless of the situation they're engaging in that may result in a use of force scenario, to resolve that situation as safely and humanely for not only the member of the public, but also for themselves. So in 2023, we noted a 20% increase in use of force reports when compared to 2022. And this can be directly attributed to an increase in weapons calls of 57% and 165% increase in stolen vehicle calls compared to 22. So why specifically do those types of calls result in greater use of force? I'll have everybody just reflect on the recent situation with the Tim Hortons drive-through and the Bronco arrest that took place. And in a situation like that, it's reported as a stolen auto call, as you just heard from Sheila with regard to the data. But what that enables is 4 officers need to respond to that call. And as a result of those 4 officers responding, we have 1 incident and 4 use of force options. And you saw the incredible control those officers showed in resolving that. But each officer is mandated in legislation to do an individual use of force report. So for greater clarity, when you look at the number of incidents from 2022, we had 517 use of force incidents. In 2023, we only had 4 more, which is 521. That resulted in 140 more reports, equating to the 20% increase. Now, what is important to look at when you're looking at how are we resolving these things in line with the Human Rights Project, you see a 53% decrease in injuries from a use of force interaction when compared to 2022, and a 74% decrease in injuries from use of force when compared to the start of the Human Rights Project. And I'll pause there for the professor to comment.
Yeah, I think you've covered most of this, Dirk. Again, many of you are familiar with me, and I've been cautious to celebrate reductions in use of force because, again, we want to look at trends. And I want to exercise a measure of caution in terms of any increases in the same way. Microphone on. Thank you. I thought we were sharing one. There we go. So measure of caution there. What we want to see in terms of use of force, and again, with respect to the Human Rights Project, is a long-term downward trend. But just to, kind of double down on what Dirk has noted, the use of force reports up, the reductions in injuries reduced. And that to me is, a positive indicator and a positive sign and a trend that we would want to continue. And when I saw the Ford Bronco incident on social media, I immediately texted it to Dirk because we'd been speaking the week before. And I think that goes to show it's an isolated incident, but the level of restraint being demonstrated, I think in many other jurisdictions, especially south of the border, we would have seen a much greater use of force, if not lethal force, and perhaps relatively quickly. So an indication that officers are getting the message.
And if you could just move to the next slide, I'll let the professor speak again about how we collect the data and how we're doing our contextualization.
Yeah, and again, this may be a repetition for folks that have been on the board for some time, new for perhaps for those that haven't, but my hopes is that as time goes on, you'll know exactly what it is that I'm going to say before I say it. This is important context. So in thinking about the collection of race and identity-based data, and importantly, its utilization, there are a series of principles and a framework that the Peel Regional Police has, I wouldn't say only been following, but really kind of building out and providing a model for others to follow. And that, of course, involves consultation, and there's been a wide range of consultation, from the inclusion of questions on public surveys with respect to the collection of the data to, of course, more in-depth engagements under Iraq and with the CAP team. The data collection has, of course, been built out. There have been, with respect to use of force, challenges because the reporting form has changed over time, and we see some of those changes reflected in the data. But obviously, there's a strong team that's been put together not only to kind of work with the data, but to pull from various data points. It must, of course, be contextualized. The data by itself mean nothing without kind of examining what the broader context for the isolated incidents or the trends may be. And then the final piece is the engagement with outside experts, not only myself and my team, but also Les Jacobs, Lauren Foster, and others.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So in 2023, we had over 900,000 911 calls that resulted in 276,444 events. And just as a gentle reminder, an event includes a traffic stop, a citizen-generated call for service, or an officer-initiated contact. From an event, we get a use of force incident, and from a use of force incident, we get a use of force report, which an officer must put in when they use force. So as in previous years, approximately 3/4 of all of our use of force is frontline. This year, it was 72%. And since the beginning of the Human Rights Project, we have had a total reduction of 33% in all types of use of force being used. And that includes a 52% decrease in physical control, an 11% decrease in drawing or pointing of a firearm, which we call use of a firearm, and 100% decrease in discharging of a firearm. For greater clarity, that means 0 discharges, and 37% decrease in discharging of a taser. And the professor, I know you had some comments on that.
Yeah, I just kind of point to the significance of that 100% drop. I think we want to knock on wood. There could be a horrific event that would result in the need for an officer to use a firearm, but that is significant. We can't diminish perhaps psychological impacts that would come from any type of force being used, but we're seeing here very clearly a reduction in the more serious types of force, and that's reflected in those injury statistics I would suggest that we saw 2 slides ago.
Thank you. Next slide, please. And every year, we've been asked to report, starting in 2022, on custody events and strip searches. This is a highly contentious issue that's recently been in the media in relation to children being strip searched. And in 2023, we had approximately 30,000 people in custody. And this was a direct result of the increase, as I highlighted at the beginning, of stolen autos and weapons calls and people being brought into custody. We actually reduced the number of strip searches by 1 down to 14 from 15 as it relates, and all of those strip searches were adults. Now, There has been no compromise to officer safety and no compromise to anybody that's been brought into custody in the Peel Regional Police. This again is a directly attributed to our oversight and the leadership from our staff sergeants that are doing this on a day-to-day basis. Next slide, please. So every year we look at disproportionalities, and the professor will get into this shortly. We have been challenged by dealing with the overrepresentation of our Black community and use of force outcomes from year over year. In 2023, regrettably, we have reduced it slightly, but it's still 31.5% of all of our use of force. And later in the presentation, we are going to speak to possible way that we can put some real context and begin to gain some insights into what is driving that disparity. And I'll turn it to you, Professor.
Thank you. Yeah, as Dirk noted, we've still got this 3 times overrepresentation of the Black community in the use of force data. Again, important to recognize that those most serious uses of force are down, meaning that the Black population is benefiting from that, but nonetheless still overrepresented, much more than I think many people would like to see. I think I can pause on any further comment until we get to the further plan.
Thank you. Can we go to the next slide, please? So use of force in mental health is of great concern to the organization and our community. As you are all aware as a board, the community consultations that were conducted here over the last several months highlighted repeatedly the definite need for the organization to be conscious of use of force and the sensitivity of people in crisis. The integration of our CSWB framework with regard to mental health strategy and human rights have helped us reduce the use of force incidents with the most vulnerable members of our community. And in 2023, we had 7,176 persons in crisis calls, of which 84 use of force incidents occurred, equating to 1.2%. And that resulted in 7 people experiencing minor injury, which is 0.1%. And that's a 75% decrease from 2022. We also noted a 58% decrease in officers injured as a result of being involved in use of force incidents, because it's very important for us to recognize the well-being of officers and that the other side of the coin, right? Like the professor had just illustrated, there's a cost, obviously, for any use of force incident out in the community, but our officers as well are also benefiting from these reductions. Did you want to talk about that?
I will, again, I just want to kind of reaffirm that point. I think a concern amongst many institutions, many police agencies would be that if officers are using force in a different manner, and especially if they're reducing their use of more serious force, then that can have an impact on them. And I think, what we're seeing here is the exact opposite. We're seeing benefits in terms of the level of injury to the public, but we're also seeing benefits in terms of the level of injury to the officers themselves. And that's of benefit, of course, to the service, to the board. Officers who experience injuries will be taking time off, and that's going to cost money. That's another body not on the road, which we know are in shorter supply than many would like at the moment. But also, for the public too. And there's a psychological as well as a physical consequence often when force is used for the officer themselves. And so, if their physical and well-being is being improved through the initiative, I think that's something that really needs to be celebrated.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So over the past year, we've been putting great emphasis into our procedural justice training, trauma-informed approach, doubling down on our de-escalation efforts and incorporating various mitigation strategies where we frame de-escalation as not something you do when you're involved in a use of force incident, but it should be your approach from the point of contact with an individual, thereby mitigating anything from escalating. As a result of this, we noted a 46% decrease in police-initiated use of force contacts with the Black community compared to 2022, and a 92% decrease in reported injury to Black people in crisis in just 1 year. And that also was reflected with our South Asian community, where we had an 80% reduction for people in crisis, which is notable. Kwasi, anything on that? No, nothing more? Okay, next slide. And here's some of the evidence of that. When we incorporated the de-escalation focus strategies in 2021 and began measuring it, you can see that year over year, this has improved. 96% was pretty good last year, but we managed to reach 97.3%. And what is really important to show when we're dealing with a human rights focused approach to doing these sorts of interactions with our community is data analysis that has shown us little variation in de-escalation applications of force and the number of officers involved in a use of force incident by race. And that is telling us that our officers are processing information better, applying those knowledge, skills, and abilities I spoke about in the opening when they're interacting with our community in every endeavor. I'll go to the next slide, please. So what are we doing next in the coming year? The board, the OHRC, and the organization are finalizing the final steps of the Human Rights Project. We are implementing those Iraq verification teams, and we're going to spend some time now and just share with you what our strategy is to address the overrepresentation that we've seen specifically in the Black community with our disparity reduction and well-being plan. If you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So last year we introduced our disparity reduction and well-being plan, which is really a fusion of the Human Rights Project and the community safety and well-being. This is novel work, and what we endeavored to do was create a risk data analysis set that we could measure an individual's lived experience whenever they were brought into custody in our organization. So for the past year, we've been collecting data on anyone that has been arrested. We formulated a questionnaire with the input of the academics in relation to the social factors and environmental factors that contribute to people having contact with the police and the correlation of use of force. We have had about a 70% compliance rate with everyone that's come into custody over the past year. We have over 6,000 different data sets that we're going to be focusing on analysis. And our hope is that we will be beginning to get insights into how employment, economics, education, early family situations, and vulnerabilities such as mental health, drug addiction, and alcohol contribute to overrepresentations in certain populations to use of force outcomes. And what we would like to do in partnership with Deputy DePatt and Deputy Andrews' team is eventually look at a multi-sectoral collaborative process with all of the different sectors in our region that have a stake in this. And I'll let the professor comment on that.
Yeah, again, when we started this work and we identified the disparities that were present in the data, I'd made clear to the board in this forum that there are, at least two main ways in which these disparities are likely to arise. Some are going to arise as a result of internal factors, biases on the part of officers, policies and practices, and the culture of the organization. Now, of course, there's a lot that happens outside of the kind of powers or responsibility of the police themselves, and these are exactly the social and the demographic factors that Dirk has been speaking to. And so as we move forward, and now we have this data set that's being built, and when Dirk had mentioned 70% compliance, that's 70% of those that are coming into custody filling out these surveys. So it's starting to garner a good amount of data, but it is going to help us begin to identify these insights that can be used to go out beyond the service into the broader community to try and establish such partnerships. And I think the goal would be to kind of expand this as possible to capture the greatest breadth of data to inform this disparity reduction plan. Again, the police undoubtedly play a role in producing these disparities, but they also undoubtedly are not responsible for all of the disparities. And so if we want to reduce them, we need to take a holistic approach. And this is the first step really in exploring those outside factors.
Thank you, Professor. And I mean, one of the important things you've heard us present previously is, right, disparity does not automatically equal discrimination. So it's going to be very important for us to look at that as leaders in the community, how we can address this on a larger scale. And just in closing, I just want to acknowledge that, this work wouldn't have been possible as we've made year-over-year progress without our Anti-Racism Advisory Committee being front and center with us on a very long journey in reaching this goal. Our membership for their commitment to change and integrating several of these new strategies, and the leadership at all levels of the organization who guide it. So on that, I will pause and we'll take any questions that the board or chief in command may have.
No, I'll go right to questions. I have a list. Mayor Parrish.
Yes, thank you. This is quite fascinating. I wouldn't mind an electronic version I could share with the rest of my councillors. We like to hope they watch you all on TV with bated breath, but they don't. They're busy people. Two things. When you get down into the bottom right corner of that slide, you're talking about social vulnerabilities. And you have youth at risk, other vulnerable basic needs. When you get into basic needs and those other categories, I would hope there was some way you could do, like you have done for employment status, do one on poverty. I think that contributes to a lot of these problems. The hub in Malton feeds 200 kids a day that come to school with no breakfast and no lunch. And I'd love to see a study done on the crime rates before the hub opened and then a year later, because I think you're going to see a big difference. So when you talk about youth at risk, the more we can invest in young people, especially in vulnerable communities, the better it's going to be. We're doing another one with help from the region. We're doing another youth hub in Glen Forest, which is the Dixie Bloor area. Everybody knows that's also one that's high risk. So if we could do a youth hub once every couple of years in vulnerable locations, and then have a study from the Moulton people to see if there's been a change, I think it would reinforce we're spending our money wisely. But thank you, this has been very interesting.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Khan.
As the newest member of the board, I'm eager to understand how we align our resources with our goals, especially after reviewing this use of force report and hearing from Superintendent Niles and the professor. While we're clearly on the right track with de-escalation efforts, we know there's more to be done. With the budget process approaching, how critical are the resources that we are allocating to training and personnel and continuing to reduce use of force incidents and enhancing de-escalation practices? Are we resourced correctly, or could increased funding accelerate these improvements?
I don't know if Anthony wanted that first, and then if anybody else wanted to speak as well.
Thank you. And this actually directly correlates to Mayor Parrish's comments related to the collection of data. In fact, the collection of data for this, it's actually risk, race, and identity strategy that we have, took over a year and a team to formulate and then operationalize. In fact, Peel Regional Police is the first police agency in Canada to operationalize this type of information. And to your point, we will absolutely explore that. I think it's very important. Some of the progress that we've seen today, and first, can I just acknowledge that the report is called Committed to Action because we are on this journey for a long time. And although we see progress, we have a lot of work to do. And so in order to do that, the investment in our people, and I'm going to let Dirk talk to the investment in hours and resourcing of training, is very considerable. We have legislated training that is required in all areas of policing. However, this training is considered from a legislative standpoint, voluntary, but it is by far the most impactful on some of the statistics that you see here today. So I'll let Dirk talk about it. And secondly, some of the technology and other resourcing that we invest as a result of recommendations that have been made by both the Ontario Human Rights Commission, our Anti-Racism Advisory Council, the board, the Governance, Human Rights and Governance Committee, directly impact the budget and resourcing allocation that we ask for every year. So Dirk, Staff Superintendent, can I ask you to maybe just comment on the training hours?
Sure.
And I know Deputy Tapata
Sure.
also has some information.
Sure. Happy to. Sure. Mr. Khan, great question. One of the biggest resources that we're seeing return on is the 5 pillars or human rights focused training. So over the last several years and through construction with the input of the professor, we have implemented, and we're the only service that's actually implemented human rights training as pillars. Procedural justice, trauma-informed approach, anti-bias training is in relation to unconscious bias and racial profiling, and legislation, and several other topics. We work very closely with Deputy DePatt and the Training Bureau, but we could easily double that training unit to meet some of the demands. And we're seeing direct correlation, and I'll let the professor comment on this because I know that there's some validation that this training is known to reduce negative outcomes. And it's a matter of what you heard earlier, that imparting this knowledge and skills, as we see year-over-year reductions, the more we do it, the better the return. And so we could easily double in that area and then easily double with our Use of Force Bureau the opportunities where we're able to go through scenarios, live scenarios on working on de-escalation. We've spoken in past about just to create, a training module for interactions with children in crisis. when we had the unfortunate situation of JKB. Took us about 7 months, clinical psychologists involved, and the more that we can integrate our approach with leading academics in other forensic fields, the better the outcomes. So it takes time. I'll let the professor just speak about some of the training that we've implemented, which is actually shared with the province and is leading the way to changing some of these outcomes.
Yeah, and I'll actually start with some of the resourcing, even around being able to pull together a report in such a way required internal human resources. And so, one of the things that I was struck by when this engagement began to roll out, because we're going on 5-ish years now, were the resources dedicated to help, pull this information together. So the folks that had been assigned to help with the race and identity-based data initiative or strategy, both sworn and civilian. So I think that's commendable, because this work can't be done off the side of someone's desk. In terms of the training, did you state clearly how many hours?
Oh, yeah. So to date, we've done 30,000 hours. We try to do about 10 hours per officer per year, because these are diminishing skills, right? The officers have to be able to integrate it with use of force and service delivery. And the goal for the future is going to be integrating greater elements of the CSWB approach, teaching officers ways to off-ramp certain events that they attend so that we can get greater long-term outcomes. And all of that takes resources, to your point.
Yeah, and so in terms of the training, I think one of the kind of important points to note here is that elements of the 5 pillars have been integrated into other areas of training. Oftentimes, like anti-racism or anti-bias training might be a small standalone that's done, by clicking a few buttons on a computer, and then folks move on. As Dirk's noted, that 10 hours per officer per year, I would say is very significant. I have, and this is again anecdotal, but I was tagged on LinkedIn a few weeks ago. There's the individual who heads one of our national anti-racism organizations, who I'm in touch with quite often, and I've been talking about the work that I'm doing with Peel, and he's often skeptical about such engagements, and he expressed such sentiment now probably 2 or 3 years ago. And he tagged me in a post, and it was actually profiling the chief and the work that the chief's been leading in this area. And he said he was struck. He's a resident of the region of Peel. And one of his neighbor's children had recently become a police officer. And this is an individual who's an expert in race relations matters. And he was questioning and having a conversation with this new recruit. He said he was struck by the level of understanding and knowledge that this individual had gained through their initial training process and their early time on the job. And I think that, again, it's anecdotal. It's one individual, but I think that sends a message that the information is getting to officers and in a substantive way.
And the only thing I would top up, because the conversation earlier was about expansions of hiring new officers and the limitations of the police college, but we have the most stringent process under Deputy DePatt, and we have very unique psychological testing that is also at the front end, so that we are able to identify people from our community who have the aptitudes that we need to be open to this approach. And that all increases resource demand when we have to screen that higher number of people per year. So.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The Training Bureau is pushed to the very max when it comes to the amount of training that has to be delivered, not just on this very significant aspect of the training that needs to be delivered to all of our members, but all of the legislative requirements on an annual basis that needs to be delivered pushes our Training Bureau to the limit. The introduction of the new Community Safety and Policing Act, the equipment, and all of those considerations, the recruiting considerations, because the success of something like this starts with making sure that we are intentional in the type of people that we're hiring and that we're selecting, puts an incredible amount of pressure on the Training Bureau and the Recruiting Bureau. I would not be able to say whether or not there's a specific number of what we would need, but certainly we're intentional in making sure that we're not squandering these opportunities to use as much as we can out of the Training Bureau officers. But we have to project growth and the needs and the evolving demands that the community requires from us going forward.
Omar, anything further? Thank you. Vice Chair Coley.
First of all, thank you. I just wanted to really take a moment on behalf of our Governments and Human Rights Committee, which I know that most of us sit on it as well. But just to acknowledge the work such important work that's happening between Peel Regional Police. And of course, we really want to thank you, Professor, for all the time and effort and your academic expertise. And of course, our critical partnership with the Ontario Human Rights Commission. I think this report, and I think as we're seeing the data come forth, we're seeing the training that is going in and all the time that the officers are putting in. I hope there is, and others can see the correlation. I mean, you use the example of that Tim Hortons. That's a really good example. We talked about it in our committee meeting as well, but just the way the response and the restraint, and I think everyone's pretty much seen it, but just the way it was handled, and I'm proud it was handled that way in Peel. But that's an exact correlation between the training and what's happening and the results of that. So first of all, I want to say thank you to you and all of you. And I think the most amazing part that really stayed with me after even, I know we were presented initially, was the disparity analysis. And I think, if everyone hasn't had a chance, take a time to go through that, because that's officers taking time when someone's coming in to collect all of this data. I think you've only had a very short time to collect it, but imagine that over a certain period of time, and what we can extrapolate from that is just phenomenal. So this is a lot of work that's going into each time someone's coming in, and our officers putting time, but this is very valuable data that we're getting in. And I think some of the things that come through, I mean, even I was shocked. Some of the thoughts you've had and what you've thought to what we're seeing are extremely different. So thank you for all the work that's going on behalf of officers, and of course the professor and Dirk, yourself, and Deputy Eduardi as well. I know a lot of time and effort goes in from your team, and thank you to everybody who serves on the Governance and Human Rights Committee. I know it takes a lot of time, but thank you. And I want to acknowledge Mr. Carby, Mr. Khan, and of course our board chair, who also sits on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And over to Mr. Carby.
Thank you, Chair. And I certainly want to echo the sentiments without being repetitive of our Vice Chair. And just lean into the preparation of the report. And the first comment is just to acknowledge the presentation of the use of force report in the context of a commitment to action, which I think Deputy Chief Eduardi kind of mentioned. So it's not just a report on the actual statistics, the collection of data, but what we're committed to do to change some of the outcomes and reduce the use of force. Of course, the part of the report that resonates with me, and maybe a little bit on a more personal level, it's the disparity as it relates to the Black community. And this is probably being involved in ARAC before, even before being at this table, I'm accustomed to seeing these use of force reports for several years, and this disparity continues to be a very stubborn one. And of course, this raises concerns within the Black community that disparity is not reducing. So I appreciate the plan that has been put forward to understand through data analysis what's causing the disparity, and of course, with the goal, as stated on your report, the goal is actually to reduce it, not just to understand it. So I appreciate that. So the one question, though, that kind of came to mind as I was looking at this, if it's a plan, one of the things that I look forward to a plan in terms of a KPI is a timeline. And maybe you could speak to that a little bit for me around, I don't want us to get caught in analysis paralysis. Every year we're coming and analyzing the same data, but nothing is shifting. So is there a kind of a timeline related to this disparity reduction plan that could help provide some context as to what the goal is?
Thanks, Mr. Carby. Never an easy question from you, but very thoughtful. Yes, the short answer is yes. The first step of this, as we began planning it about 24 months ago through detailed conversations with the professor, was we had to collect the data. And we had to be able to position the data, which we were going to do for next year, against charge, arrest, and the correlation of all of those things with use of force outcomes. So our plan is actually to get together, because we've now formed our community advisory panel, and the sentiment of the recommendations in relation to all of this is to include Iraq in this process. So we are going to be taking all of our data, which we'll have a complete data set this fall. In fact, our first meeting, I think, is in a couple of weeks in relation to it. And then we have to figure out exactly what the analysis is telling us. Once we have that analysis, we've mobilized the entire team to stay focused on this, to add to the additional reporting next year on charge arrest and what we learned from this. And then we want to come back to the board next year, depending on what we find, and come with some definitive strategies. We're in conversations already with different sectors in the region. Preliminarily, we have retained Ms. Claudia McCoy to also help us, not only with Upsurgence, to help us with our AI community consultations, but to begin organizing the different sectors that we have in our community that can give us some inputs on how we can put short-term, mid-term, and long-term interventions in place after we see what the data says. So we don't know what the data is going to tell us, and I mean, I don't want to speak for the professor, but based on what we learn, then we will formulate the action plans with our partners who we're already in conversation with. So we will have a robust update for it next year's reporting.
So final comment is to thank you then for the report, and I look forward to that update, and maybe a special thank you to the professor. He is always present at our ARAC meetings and adds so much context to the information that we're dealing with, and also brings that academic perspective that allows us to see that the direction in which we're going is one thought through, and also has community input. So thank you so much for it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Chief, any final comments from you?
Yes, just again, thank you to the professor for his time and energy and his lens to the data and what it means. But to Mayor Parrish, we do intend on sending out the link report presentation for, of course, to you, the whole board and the mayors, but as well as all the councillors as well and elected officials. So you'll should have that, if not right away, in your inbox.
Thank you. If I could just add a thought or two, Vice Chair, you picked up on it, but all the discussions, all the training, all the things that we say around the table and whomever says it are to drop in the bucket compared to what that officer did at Tim Hortons and how that message is spent through that medium, more so than whatever we could say or do. It was instructive, it was symbolic, and a lot of people don't know what we do for a living. Some of my neighbors sort of know. But I mean, you do something with the police, don't you, Nanda? Yeah. Well, boy, I saw that thing at Tim's, and the two most common phrases from dozens and dozens. Well, that was a heck of a job by that officer. I got to tell you, the second most common phrase was, "Why the hell didn't he just shoot him?" The number, I don't know how I didn't. I just shot him. And you try to explain. You understand? We want the officer not to be shooting anybody, and we don't want to shoot anybody, and we want everybody to go home safely. I can say it. He proved it. And I'd like to think, and this is my second thought to the Professor Okwasi, the biggest challenge I have in this job lately is you start to believe your own press clippings. You're touching upon that. I'm using different, but we're pretty damn good at what we do. I keep saying that, but you don't want to believe it yourself and drink your own Kool-Aid because, and this is why I love you, and I'm expressing it differently. Maybe we're not there yet, though. We have so much more to do, and if we start thinking that way, we get complacent. But Rob will tell you the number of times it's just me and him in a room, and I go, Rob, I think we're pretty good at what we do. We can always do, and he goes, yeah, Nando, but we have to do better. I think that is the thought that I take away. By God, are we on the right track and then some? The chief knows, Rob knows, presentation we did in Halifax, I was dumbfounded by the people that approached us and patted on, and you're the gold standard, folks, pardon the pun. You're it. Like, presenters that came up after us, one came up with death, you got to follow Peel in a presentation. Well, who's listening to me? Because it's Peel, and you're the gold. Wow, I kind of believe we are, but it's nice to hear others saying it. So I take away from all of this, by God, thank everybody for all your efforts from the chief on down, Quasi, the whole team, but it is a journey and we still have a way to go. And I love to see you nodding, Professor, because I hope that says it all, but you still have to stop and say, well done for how far we've come along the journey so far. With that, if I have no other speakers, I'm going to ask for Chief. Sorry, Deputy Andrews, go ahead.
Through the chair, I just want to sort of top up on this because the incident at Tim Hortons has received wide acknowledgement and consistent praise. In calendar year 2023, we had 82 of those incidents. where vehicles were rammed sometimes in very dynamic situations, and no shots were fired. So these are not one-offs. This is a symbol of how well our people are being trained, how well they're doing their jobs on a day in and day out basis at the front lines.
I am so thrilled that you say that, because there's the direct evidence, there's the, not anecdotal, that was a tip of an iceberg, and we have the right to, I didn't know that. Fantastic. Well done. More to do, but well done. Okay. With that, I'm going to ask my vice chair to move receipt of the information. All those in favor? My colleagues take a quick 5-minute bio break. Then I will have you back at noon or 5 after to carry on with the in-camera portion of the agenda. Thank you to all.